Hi class, welcome back to 7th grade music. Today we are going to be looking into a lesson topic for the Multiculturalism in Music unit that we started last week. Today's topic is the United States President's Own Marine Band, and we are also going to be looking at some unit vocabulary that is correlated with our activity for the week, which is going to be a vocabulary test. I wouldn't worry so much because it is going to be open book, so feel free to reference this video as many times as you would like. So if you remember from last time, we did talk about two of the vocabulary words that we are going to incorporate. The first one is going to be struggle, a long and difficult attempt to achieve something such as freedom or political rights, and cultural identity, which is having the identity or feeling like you belong to a group. And then before we start this lesson, I do want to say that I'm sorry I do not have video today. I am having some technical difficulties with the streaming service, but I should have that figured out by next lesson. So let's go ahead and get started. We are going to begin with some history of the United States Marine Band. So on July 11th, 1798, President John Adams signed an act of Congress establishing the President's Own United States Marine Band. The President's Own United States Marine Band did not perform at the Executive Mansion until January 1st, 1801, which was for a New Year's celebration. Today, the band performs over 500 events a year, which means that a few times a year they're actually performing multiple times a day. And then every October through November, the band travels across the country for their yearly tour, which was established by bandmaster John Philip Sousa. Okay. And we're going to hear a little bit more about John Philip Sousa in this clip, as well as a hearing of the Stars and Stripes Forever, the National March.
John Philip Sousa led the Marine Band to new heights of popularity during his tenure as leader from 1880 to 1892. It was during this era that he earned the title the March King, a well-deserved nickname that continues to this day. Of the 136 marches he composed, one has stood out above all the rest. It was composed in 1896 as Sousa sailed back home from a long European vacation. The inspiration for this march was born of a combination of homesickness, fond memories of his time as leader of the Marine Band, and his stirring recollection of the American flag flying over the White House. The resulting march became his best-known work, and in 1987 it officially became our national march, the Stars and Stripes Forever.
Okay, so thank you for listening to that brilliant performance by the President's Own. Now we're going to move on to some unit vocabulary that is directly related to the military band setting. So that's going to include military band itself and some other components that are important. And we're actually going to see some of the instruments that we just saw live. So we're going to begin with military band itself. The definition of a military band is a group of musicians that plays brass, woodwind, and percussion instruments typically while marching. It is also important to note that those who are affiliated with military band are active members of the military. This includes people that joined the military primarily to be a musician, and then those who are actually combat trained. So either way, they are active members and they receive rank. So now we're actually going to take a look at a military band that actually marches while playing. So we're going to take a look at the Marine Corps West Coast Composite Band as they demonstrate a proper march. So pay attention to stuff like their foot movement, how they're spaced in a block, and the instruments that they're playing. Okay, so that was an example of a marching military band, and it was a great example at that. So there was actually some different instruments that you can see aren't in the concert setting, but are in the marching setting, so that's very interesting. So let's move on to the next vocabulary word, which is going to be a composer. And the definition of a composer is a person who writes music for a job. And over on the right side of the page, I have an example of a prominent composer of the 20th century, Leonard Bernstein. And he is actually well known best for his musicals. Okay, and the first instrument that we are going to look at is going to be the piccolo. And the definition of a piccolo is a small flute that sounds an octave higher than the regular flute. And over to the right, we do have an example of a professional musician. I'm not going to stumble upon his name, but I did want to include a picture of a professional so that we can see the size of the piccolo in relation to the body of the human. Okay. Now we're going to go over to a baton, and the definition of a baton is a thin stick used by a conductor or band director to conduct a band. Lots of conducting. All right, but I think it's important to note that in this picture of the baton, we do have a conductor who is holding it in his left hand, when traditionally it is held in the right hand. And he's also using his right hand to shape the music. Next we have John Philip Sousa. We've already heard a little bit about him, but he's an American bandmaster and composer of military marches. And if you look over underneath his photo, you can actually see that he lived from 1854 to 1932. And then next we have the snare drum, another instrument of military band. And as you can see, the military drum line is playing the snare drum. And the snare drum is a small drum struck by wooden sticks in military band. And I think it's important to note that their sticks are all uniform, all the stick heights and placements, as well as their uniform is, and the snare drums that they're playing on. And then finally, we have the tuba, which is very common in a military band. The definition of a tuba is a large brass wind instrument with 3 to 6 valves covered by this player's hands, and a broad bell, which is the top of the instrument. And you can see as the bell is flared out. Okay, so that concludes our vocabulary list. But this is a reminder for the assignment that's going to be due November 18th by 11:59 p.m. On the course shell, you should find a vocabulary test from today's lesson, and I'm going to post this video as well so that you can reference the material. There is an extra credit opportunity involved with this assignment, so if you include the name of a professional musician for each instrument discussed today, the flute or piccolo, the tuba, a percussionist, and a conductor, I will add 10 points to your assignment. And then again, this assignment is due November 18th. And then to conclude this lesson, we are going to take a look at one more example of the President's Own United States Marine Band. And with this listening, I want you guys to pay attention to the instruments we talked about today. Try to point them out in the ensemble. And I want you to also examine any other characteristics of the band that you might notice. And this can also be in relation to diversity. So, let's give this a listen. This is actually a piece by Percy Grainger, another prominent composer. Thank you for joining me today, and if you have any questions, feel free to email me.